Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. Can Europe stand on its own? What to do if the US abandons Ukraine? Is NATO on the brink of fundamental change? A short while ago, these questions were mostly the stuff of speculation among commentators and academics. But Trump's arrival at the White House has made them a stark reality. Against this background, European powers, wrong-footed by the unorthodox style of the newest president, are trying to find their balance once again. Leading the way is Emmanuel Macron, the first European leader to hold a full-fledged meeting with Trump in Washington, D.C. Joining us now to discuss this meeting and its implications is Paweł Zerka, Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So what were your initial impressions following that meeting? The atmosphere seemed to be friendly. However, the language adopted by the two leaders, it differed quite substantially, wouldn't you agree?
I think that Emmanuel Macron didn't achieve much, although Europeans have no other choice but to try talking to Donald Trump, trying to convince him, trying to make their case on why supporting Ukraine with stronger guarantees is so important. But in many ways, this meeting between Macron and Trump, it looked like a dialogue of the deaf. They were saying different stuff, even if in friendly language. So, for example, Donald Trump was repeating his suggestions that the US has paid much more than Europeans in their support for Ukraine, whereas Macron was correcting him friendly, saying that actually it was Europe who paid 60% of the support. And similarly, Emmanuel Macron was saying that he has achieved the US guarantee in case Europeans wanted to send their troops to Ukraine after the ceasefire is reached. But Trump didn't confirm that, and it didn't look like he was willing to confirm anything like that.
So would you say that perhaps another European leader could be better at being the so-called Trump whisperer? Who would be the best Trump whisperer at this stage?
I'm not sure whether this is the matter of finding the best Trump whisperers. And there are several politicians in Europe who have access to Trump, at least. One of them is surely Emmanuel Macron, thanks to the contacts established already during Donald Trump's first presidency. And we have already seen that there is some sort of a good vibe between the two. That's why Donald Trump participated in the Notre Dame meeting in Paris a couple of weeks ago. Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, is another politician who could have good contact with Donald Trump. Andrzej Duda, Giorgia Meloni are other politicians, Viktor Orban, but of course each of them differs in the extent to which they are trusted by the rest of Europe.
Well, definitely. Viktor Orban is a complete outlier here because he is more on the Russian side when it comes to the question of Ukraine, for example. But coming back to the question of how Macron actually fared during that meeting, to what extent do you think his position is ultimately limited by the situation at home? Because in order to make strong statements and make powerful decisions on the European stage, you need to have a powerful backing on the political scene, the domestic political scene.
No, I think it's an irrelevant matter. So, of course, Macron is not strong domestically in the sense of having a weak government and being, in a way, a lame duck because he will no longer be able to stay as president of France after 2027. But it still leaves him a couple of years as the head of one of the most powerful European countries. And he retains his prerogatives in foreign policy. So actually, I think that the domestic situation in France does not matter that much in how Emmanuel Macron is behaving internationally. What limits him more is the fact that Europeans themselves are limited, are divided. Macron would want to be able to travel to Washington and to represent a unified European voice on war in Ukraine, on the right approach to be adopted towards Russia. But we can see that with Donald Trump in the White House, Europeans themselves are choosing quite different attitudes, and even Poland, as a result of its geographical location, but also the history of the transatlantic relations between Poland and the US, Poland has been more shy to criticize Donald Trump. Whereas many European leaders would prefer to be more open in their criticism of the approach to the war in Ukraine that Donald Trump has adopted. So this already shows to you that there are many different divisions among Europeans, and it's not simply Hungary and Slovakia who are the outliers, whereas everyone else agrees on the right approach.
But this really is an intriguing question, isn't it? Like, what countries in Central and Eastern Europe should do at this stage? Because they do enjoy fairly good relations with Trump, knowing that Trump has praised many of these countries, including Poland, for defense spending. On the other hand, also, there is an overwhelming interest for Europe to be unified on the question of helping Ukraine. So do you think that Poland is doing well in this regard, trying to navigate that? And, for example, Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski making diplomatic statements where necessary, but also when talking about countries like Russia and Iran, not being quite so diplomatic, so saying what he really thinks and what is reflected ultimately in the sentiments both in Poland and neighboring countries. Do you think this is the right approach, going softly on the United States and the new administration?
I think Poland is in a particularly difficult situation, and you were previously asking me about the domestic context and the extent to which it limits Emmanuel Macron. I think it limits even more the Polish government, because the transatlantic relationship, we can see already this with Andrzej Duda's visit to Washington. This becomes part of the domestic debate in Poland, and it will become part of the presidential campaign as well. Poland is in a very tricky position. It's much closer to the war than the French or the Brits. So it needs to somehow talk with a different story to different partners. So Poland needs to talk to the US, reminding Donald Trump of the importance of a stable peace in Ukraine, and making sure that America's security commitment to Europe remain intact. But at the same time, Poland needs to prepare for a world in which it can no longer trust that much the American security guarantee. It needs therefore to talk to partners in Europe like France, Germany, Britain, Sweden, the Baltics, but mostly the Western Europe, the powerful countries like France and Britain, to make sure that they are serious when they say that Europe should prepare for European security without the US. Because we can hear such words and declarations from the likely new Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, or from Emmanuel Macron, but Poland does not know yet how serious they are and how much Poland can really trust them when they say so. I think that we are moving towards a world in which Europeans will need to take a greater burden for their own security, and Poland, in a way, will need to play a crucial role in finding the right setting for this.
So how would you describe the American attitude towards Europe right now under the Trump administration? Friedrich Merz said this is an attitude of indifference. Would you agree with that?
So I wouldn't call it an American attitude. I would call it a Trumpian attitude. So and there is a lot of humiliation of Europe in that attitude. The fact that we are bypassed in Trump's talks with Putin, the fact that whoever visits Trump in Washington is in a way humiliated. So Polish President Andrzej Duda was humiliated because Donald Trump came late for a meeting with him and only spent maximum 10 minutes with him. Emmanuel Macron yesterday was similarly humiliated. There are photos of him sitting like a schoolboy next to in the office of Donald Trump. I think that Donald Trump is not a fan of Europe, especially European Union. And this is a danger for us. With many of his acts, he is downsizing Europe. But ultimately, it's for Europeans themselves to demonstrate that Europe should not be humiliated that much and that it should be treated seriously. So it's a moment of, like, it's a banal thing I'm going to say, but it's a moment of truth for Europeans as well. They will need to show how serious they are and how serious also they are about supporting Ukraine, even if the support from the US ends up being limited.
A very quick question. Do you think the recent announcement of sanctions against Russia is a sufficient sign of European determination, or do we need to do more?
No, we definitely need to do more. There needs to be a greater clarity on the European side also how much we can commit in terms of troops being sent to Ukraine under different scenarios. In many ways, Europeans are doing their job. So yesterday in Washington at the United Nations, Europeans were standing hand by hand with Ukrainians, defending the right language of talking about war in Ukraine, so that it's clear that Russia is an aggressor and that those people who are dead in Ukraine are not simply victims of some sort of an earthquake. But apart from supporting Ukraine in that diplomatic extent, also Europeans will need to be able to show a real firepower, both economically and militarily. And this is the main area where they still need to do a job of finding the right approach together in a unified way, or as much unified as possible, because nobody expects Slovakia or Hungary to be part of it.
Paweł Zerka was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
And I'm Jonasz Lewiński. Please stay with us here on TVP World.